So it was just a horrendous, horrendous meeting, and Mussolini's laughing at this clown. But that summer, what happens is, the first thing is the Hitler conducts the Rome Purge of the SA, which was had millions of members, and the German army, which was only 100,000 strong, or maybe secretly was larger. The German army tells to Hitler, said, "Look, you want our support and allegiance, you got to get rid of this thing, this monstrous SA. It's a rival to the army." And Rome is becoming a counter force, and Rome was Ernst Röhm. He was a homosexual, but he was a war hero, and he wanted a second revolution. In other words, completing the revolution, and he was very much a socialist, very much on the left. And so Hitler decided against Rome was getting too big for his britches. So he flew down there and personally led the purge of Rome, where they put him, they caught him all in homosexual trysts, and they put him in the penitentiary, and they were shooting him left and right. They killed two of them, or they killed about 200 of the SA leaders. I mean, they were a vicious bunch. But at the time, the SS took the opportunity to kill a former prime minister and his wife, and to try to kill Franz von Papen, whom they didn't kill. But then what happens here after that is, that just stunned Mussolini. He said, these people are complete barbarians. And what happened after that was the coup by local Nazis in Vienna, where local Nazis, probably not with the knowledge of Hitler, people don't know, but walked in and assassinated Dollfuss, who was a Catholic conservative, very hardliner, anti-Nazi. They assassinated him, and at that, Mussolini sent 4 divisions up the Brenner Pass, and threatened to intervene if the Germans intervened. And he called the British and French to Stresa, which is in the northern part of Italy. It's on one of the lakes up there. And he said, we got to form a Stresa front. Britain, France, and Germany, and Italy, if the Germans make another move in violation of Versailles, we have to act together and stop them. He was strongly anti-Nazi. He thought Hitler was a degenerate, a sexual degenerate, he said, and these people are out of the woods. These are not fascists. These Nazis are a different breed altogether. I mean, we have ideas rooted in the Roman past and family and tradition, and these people are a different type. And he was the hardest driving force for an alliance of Britain, France, and Italy to stop Adolf Hitler.
So, Pat Buchanan, in your view, how do you get from that point to the Mussolini-Hitler alliance?
Well, you get very simple. Mussolini, in the Stresa front, the agreement said, we're going to act together against any threat in Europe. And Mussolini put the words "in Europe" because he had plans then to move into Ethiopia because of an incident on the border where Italians were attacked, I believe, by huge, massive Ethiopian troops at Walwal. And in 1896, the Italians had been defeated at Adwa by the Ethiopian forces. They called it Abyssinia. And the Italian prisoners had been just carved up, just mutilated. It was horrible what was done to them. And Mussolini wanted Ethiopia, or he at least wanted the plains of the Ogaden in Ethiopia. And he thought that the British and French, who, after all, had an awful lot of empire, the Brits had all the way down the. Oh, you could walk all the way from Cairo down to Cape Town without leaving a British imperial territory. Mussolini thought they would smile and let him take Ethiopia, and instead, the British and French are on their high horse, their League of Nations morality. They impose sanctions on him, and they get the League of Nations to impose sanctions on him. But the sanctions are too weak to drive him out of Ethiopia, but they're strong enough to antagonize and alienate him. And they drove Mussolini straight into the arms of a man he had hated, Adolf Hitler. And out of that came the Pact of Steel and the Hitler-Mussolini, the Axis. And that was another blunder by the British and French that led directly to World War II.
Jonah Goldberg, National Review Online, writes this about your newest book. Buchanan claims to be a man of abstract foreign policy rules. In his case, the notion that we must act from objective national interest. As a result, he has earned a strange new respect among anti-war liberals, self-described realists, for his opposition to the war in Iraq in recent years. He is a man of principle, we've been told. In reality, Buchanan is a wonderful example of how those who claim to follow a strict set of abstract foreign policy rules are often just disguising their own biases. A strict and objective application of our national interest isn't the principle he's upholding. No cold pragmatist he. Buchanan's not following anything here other than the loyalties of his own heart.
You mean, I don't know exactly what he's referring to. I'm talking here, basically, about the vital national interest of the British Empire at each point in this process. It seemed to me at Versailles, even though it's very difficult for them at Versailles, given passions that had been aroused by the horrors of the war, to impose a just peace, they should have corrected the errors of Versailles in Britain's own interest, in France's own interest, when they had a democratic Germany. As you move through each of these things, the British should have acted in their own interest and told the Americans, we will break our alliance with Japan if you will give us an alliance. They didn't do that. They broke the alliance with Japan. They caved into the Americans. They capitulated. They appeased the Americans. That was a mistake. With regard to Ethiopia, with regard to Mussolini, and Kissinger agrees here with me, and everybody else does. Churchill eventually does. And Churchill even did at the time. He said, I'm very worried about breaking it up with Italy, which has been a longtime friend of ours, over Ethiopia, which is, nobody can say that it's a modern nation or an advanced civilized nation. Why are we destroying our relationship with the Italians over this colony, over Ethiopia, which we don't care about, when the vital thing is the Germans and we want the alliance with Italy? This is the standpoint of all these decisions, is British vital national interests. As I said, the war guarantee was an act of folly because Britain had no vital interest in Eastern Europe, had no interest at all in who controlled Danzig or the corridor, and yet they put the British Empire on the line to go to war on behalf of Poland in a cause in which they disbelieved and in a war they could not win in Eastern Europe where they had never fought before. Why in heaven's name would you do that? And the answer, of course, is that Chamberlain did it in panic and hysteria. He had been humiliated by Hitler because Czechoslovakia had fallen apart. He'd been made a fool of. And so, and he's being pushed by his foreign minister, and he's being pushed by Churchill and Attlee and all the rest. So he makes a stupid decision which cost Britain their empire. No, I support the Americans. As I say, we did it right. Our vital interests, quite frankly, were not in Hungary. And so Ike didn't intervene. Our vital interests weren't in Poland in 1953. They weren't in Czechoslovakia in 1968. We didn't go to war. We just drew a line. We said, don't cross that line, because once you get into Western Germany, you're talking about the vital interest of the United States. We did it right. The British did it wrong. That is the entire, or one of the entire points of this book.
Are all wars unnecessary?
No. I mean, the Belgians had no choice in, say, World War I or World War II. They could either fight or lie down. The American Revolutionary War, probably you had to fight to be free of the British Empire. Frankly, the Confederates, if they wanted to be free of the Union, they were going to have to fight Mr. Lincoln's army. So it depends on what your objective is. But an awful lot of wars are unnecessary. The war in Iraq was an unnecessary war. It was a war of choice. We attacked the nation, had not attacked us, did not threaten us, did not want war with us. In order to deprive it of weapons it did not have. That is an unnecessary war.
When you hear the term isolationist, what does that mean to you, and do you consider yourself to be one? Well,
isolationist is a pejorative term. It came into real currency around the time of the Spanish-American War, when the new imperialists, like Theodore Roosevelt and the others, after the Spanish-American War, they wanted to acquire, and did acquire, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Hawaiian Islands, and they annexed the Philippine Islands, which turned America from a republic into an empire. And a number of anti-war folks, liberals and conservatives alike in that era, said, this is imperialism. This dishonors our founding fathers. This is taking rule of an alien people whom we have no intention of making American citizens. We are behaving like the other empires of the world. And the people who opposed that were called isolationists. And it was used, frankly, in the 1930s to demonize and smear those like Jack Kennedy, like young Jack Kennedy, young Joe Kennedy, Sergeant Shriver, Gerald Ford, Potter Stewart, who started or supported the America First Committee, which was formed in about April August of 1940, I believe, and it was designed to keep the United States out of another bloodbath like the First World War, where everything we went to fight for had been lost when the Allies divided up the whole world. I mean, we went fought to make the war safe for democracy. And these young folks, like Jack Kennedy and others, said, we made it safe for the British Empire, which added 1 million square miles and tens of millions of new subjects. We made it safe for the Japanese Empire. We made it safe for the French Empire. And now we got Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, and Lenin. So how good a war was that? We don't want another one like it. And they were very patriotic people, and they've been smeared ever since. And I mean, they had 3 presidents, Herbert Hoover, Gerald Ford, and Jack Kennedy, were America firsters. I mean, are they unpatriotic? And so what the idea, but the isolationist term is false in this sense. Those of us who don't want to get in wars that are none of our business, we don't think we ought to be isolated from the world. Neither did Washington and Jefferson and Adams. They thought we should trade with the entire world. They thought we should have as much commercial intercourse as possible, but stay out of any political alliances. Stay out of alliances which can drag us into war. And one of the great achievements, John Adams, of his life was to sever that war, the 1778 treaty with France, which Washington had danced a jig when he got it because he meant they're going to beat the British. But once they won the war, they said, okay, let's get rid of the French. And they were exactly right. We want you guys helping us, and we'll pay you for it, but once it's done, we don't want any part of the Napoleonic Wars. And John Adams, he ended the naval war with France. We were fighting at sea constantly with them. He ended the naval war with France, and they cut a deal, and what we got out of it was we severed our treaty with France. And so we stayed out of the Napoleonic Wars until Madison and some of the war hawks, some of the neocons of that day, said, look, we can seize Canada. This is great. You know, Wellington's preoccupied here, and the French are going to invade Russia. Let's grab Canada. And so we went into the War of 1812. Now, we had our motives. The Brits were impressing seamen. They were treating us as they usually treated Cousin Jonathan, with contempt. And the Americans were very bellicose folks in those days. But we went up there to grab Canada, too. We had two invasions. Both of them, neither one succeeded. And if it weren't for, frankly, if it weren't for the great Andrew Jackson at New Orleans, the Brits would have torn our country apart.